purpose of the hairpin turn is to keep archers from having a line of sight on the main courtyard until they have actually approached it. So, for example, if a goblin archer got into that hallway, he actually has to turn the corner all the way around before he can actually start firing arrows at dwarves that might be in the main courtyard. It's an intentional structure. It doesn't have to be a hairpin turn. A 90-degree turn is more than enough. But since I want the actual bridge to head out to the east, that works perfectly well. And what we'll do here is we'll set up a double drawbridge. We'll have an outer drawbridge right around in here that will bridge over a wet, dry, muddy moat in this area here, which will prevent people from getting in unless they can fly. And then we'll have an inner drawbridge here that will restrict access to the main courtyard. And the reason I will do this is I will then designate a meeting area, which I need to do downstairs, a meeting area in this area, which we will use as a customs area. And what you basically end up with is a handy trick where you can close the inner drawbridge, activate the meeting area here, and the migrants will come running into this meeting area because that's where they all regroup. Now, normally you want them regrouping in your dining room, but since there might be hidden ambushes between the migrants and the actual fortress, and we don't want the goblins to just sneak in and suddenly appear in our main courtyard, we'll leave the inner gate up, move the migrants into the gatehouse, lock the outer door, disable this meeting area, and open the inner door, and the migrants will flood from this meeting area down into the dining room where we want them, at which point we can seal this back up and open the outer door again, effectively airlocking them through this chamber, this hallway. This type of dual-gated structure is fairly common. It's not necessary to have two gates. A single gate is more than enough to keep out intruders, but as I said, if hidden invaders sneak in while the drawbridge is down, at that point the drawbridge didn't do me a whole lot of good. So one of the things I like to do is have a dual-gated system where intruders are kept out by the inner or outer gate as appropriate. We will actually build, and we haven't yet, but we'll actually build a watchtower in this area here for animals to serve as guards. And I'll show you how to build an animal-powered watchtower in a bit. But for right now, this little area here, suffice to say, will eventually become a small one-level tower that will spot any thieves or intruders as they're coming in. I'll also station a couple of guard dogs, for example, here on chains, in order to any thieves that do manage to sneak in before I get the animal watchtower, or maybe the animal dies for whatever reason and they sneak in, the guard animals will spot them and drive off the thieves. Now, a couple of guard animals is not enough to deal with a goblin ambush, not by itself. It's certainly not enough to deal with a siege unless you just have more guard animals than you know what to do with. It would be a mass slaughter, and the animals will generally get the worst of it. You certainly don't have enough animals, even if you have large quantities of multiple types of animals, to handle multiple sieges with just animals alone. But with curtain walls and archers and a sort of layered defense, you can actually set up a fairly secure fortress fairly quickly. We'll be done with this curtain wall here momentarily. I'll show you what I'm getting ready to do next. We're going to set all of our haulers and record keepers, mine workers, carpenters. Oh, not mine workers. I need them to finish the magma taps. Our crossbowmen, don't need our farmers, and our kitchen worker are all suddenly going to become temporary wall builder masons. Now, in order to keep them from gaining any skill as masons, what I have to do is I have to go down here and suspend or forbid or profile all of the rock block jobs that I currently have running in our masons' shops. So I don't want any of these jobs running. If they're running now, I want them canceled. And we'll go ahead and get everybody busy on laying blocks. And what you're going to see is a vast swarm of people come flying out. And in the last in, first out order, they're going to start moving blocks into those walls that I've designated. And we'll actually do this basically en masse. Building constructions does not give your dwarves masonry experience, so this is safe. It doesn't risk us getting a mood. You do have to watch out for a couple of minor things. Wagons can't cross trees, for example, so there's a tree that would have blocked the wagon right there. At some point down the road, we'll actually build down the road we'll build roads. Wow. We'll actually build a road for our dwarves to traverse the caravan to run across so that we don't have to worry about trees blocking our path, for example. If I were doing this with just the skilled masons, I only have 3 of them at the moment, This job would take a lot longer than it's going to, with this group of dwarves all working together basically in tandem. Building the wall will take very little time, and will probably be done right around the end of the year, which is a little later than I would like, but I've been distracted by other things, like multiple wildfires, for example. We'll build the first drawbridge, here, for example, and I'll dig a trench. Let's get the miners working on the trench so we can get that up and running now, and then we will dig from there. We will have this trench to keep out intruders, and since it's going to get flooded anyway, I might as well dig it out broadly enough that it looks like a real ditch. It'll get a little bit of water in it, but it won't ever flood deeply enough to allow a swimmer across. Once this trench is dug, it's simply too large. The water will spread out too far, it will evaporate, and we'll end up with a dry moat. I prefer dry moats to wet moats. There are fewer things that can fly that can swim. I prefer dry moats to lava moats, although lava moats are wonderfully dwarfy. Anything that can swim in lava can swim in lava, and will swim right across your open moat. So this will allow us to keep out flyers, anything but a flyer, for example, and there aren't really that many attackers who can also fly. Most of those that can fly, we're probably not going to see in the first year or two. No promises, I suppose it's possible, but most of them will be kept out by a simple curtain wall. At some point down the road, it might behoove us to go back and roof this all in so it effectively becomes underground. But typically what I will do is wall myself in like this, build a bridge over the area that I want to gate off effectively. We will then look at digging a depot in another area down below and having our depot actually underground so that our dwarves actually never need to visit the surface ever again. I'm going to dig a small lever chamber here. This little square room will be for our gates in this little temporary access area. It'll be our main gate until we get the next gate built. So we might as well go ahead and put it. I like to build my lever complexes where I'm going to store all my levers basically right off the dining room. There are almost always idle dwarves in your dining room available to pull levers on demand. So having the levers close to where the idle dwarves in means the levers get pulled quickly, and you end up with a situation where basically you order a lever to be pulled and it is effectively instant. Now, one thing we did not do that we need to do right now before I forget again is we need to make sure that we get a meeting area built. While I don't want to designate the room that is a dining room as a meeting hall, I do want to create a zone that is a meeting area. Don't blame me for the terms, guys. That's just the way Dwarf Fortress does it. Meeting areas are a zone, and they have a couple of useful functions. Basically, they tell idle dwarves, hey, go idle here. So if you're not doing anything else and you want something to do, this is the place to hang out and talk to your fellow dwarves and so forth. And what we're going to get out of that is all of the idle dwarves who are currently on the surface hanging out at the wagon, because the wagon is effectively a default meeting area, will instead migrate themselves down to the dining room, where they will basically hang out whenever they're not doing anything else. Additionally, migrants home in on the meeting area, so if they're looking for a place to hang their hat, so to speak, they're going to make their way to the meeting area, and it's that trend, it's that we're going to abuse, so to speak, in getting them to move to the places we want them to move. This bridge here will eventually be able to raise and become effectively a wall. If I were dealing with magma, I would want to make sure that this was magma safe. I am not. We're going to go back and remove the ramps from this area here, except for one. We want to be able to allow people to climb out of the hole. You can create a pit that nothing can get out of, but that can mean that your dwarves can't leave the fortress ever again because they get scared by the goblin in the pit. The goblin can't get out, your dwarves can't walk past him. That's not really a fun problem to have to fix after the fact. So generally speaking, leave your goblins a way out of your traps. It doesn't have to be a way out that they'll survive, it just has to be a way out so that they will continue to try and get out and not bung up your fortress effectively. By leaving the ramps on the outside over there, basically if something falls into this pit, it's going to move away from the fortress before it's allowed to come back in and make another attempt. Now we're going to build a few basic... See, right there. Got our first thief. Or second thief. I think we had one in the first season, but he's going to take off because he got caught. I don't think we have... No, we do not have any ropes. We didn't buy any from the first caravan, and I haven't made any yet. Our plump helmets appear to be overwhelming us here. Why are we... Oh, our haulers are all busy moving bricks, probably. Or our food stockpile is full. I'm not sure which. Let's take a look here real fast, because this is a potential problem in the making. I've got a lot of plump helmets that are going to go bad here very soon. Let's see. We've got 5 idlers. Who is idle and needs to be hauling food instead? Oh, everybody. That should get everybody moving food from these temporary stockpiles down to the main stockpile, and that should give the dwarves who are doing all the harvesting a chance to harvest the plump helmets which we're about to rot in the fields. I can do options all dwarves may harvest, but I don't like using it all the time. So it's, from my standpoint, I prefer to switch it off in Dwarf Therapist. You don't normally need it for very long. And I prefer to have skilled... I prefer to leave it off generally to get my farmers more skilled more quickly. You'll notice that they've already started to collect. If I lose a couple of plump helmets to rot, a couple isn't a big deal. Losing an entire crop is a different story. And you can see we've started to get some rope reeds harvested as well. So at this point we're ready to start doing cloth processing, and in order to do that we need to have a farmer's workshop devoted to that. We can use the one that we built earlier up here for cloth processing. This isn't going to be particularly efficient, but we'll get an idle dwarf who isn't doing anything else, and he'll come along and he'll drag rope reeds up and make them into thread. The thread will get made into cloth. And we can start building bags, for example, to harvest our quarry bushes and so forth. See, already, just with what I've done there, the dwarves have picked that stuff up, they've moved it off. The harvesting was still all done by the skilled dwarves. All that I did was clean up the hauling backlog that we had built up. So all the harvesting skill went to my farmers, as opposed to ending up dabbling on all my other dwarves. So these dwarves got a lot more skill from picking their plants, and all of the other dwarves helped get the stock moved off to the stockpiles. That's really the best of all possible worlds in that situation. You can get around it without using therapists by going into orders and switching that only farmers to be dwarves all, as one of my viewers recommended. But what you'll end up with is a host of dabbling farmers rather than diverting that skill to the dwarves you really want to have it. It's your choice. Both work. One is 2 button presses and the other is a little more work. So I'm willing to do player work if it's going to gain me an appreciable, tangible benefit and not just carpal tunnel syndrome. As you can see at the bottom there, we've started to get masterpieces created. I'm not sure which dwarf that is. It's probably our carpenter. Our carpenter is now making masterwork bins and beds, for example, and so we'll have better quality beds. As you can see, dwarves are all sleeping in the dormitories now. We're going to have enough beds now, I think, that we can probably start expanding the dormitory. This will also improve the value of the dormitory itself, because more beds means higher room value. The better quality of the room that they sleep in, the better quality of basically their happy thought for sleeping in that room. We'll do a nice little aesthetic circle within a circle kind of look here, and we'll do a final circle right up on the staircases themselves. Dwarves can sleep uneasily if there's noise nearby. This room has been carved out, so we don't have to worry about mining waking anybody up, but when I go back later and I smooth it, the dormitory I may end up with a few dwarves who get a negative thought from being woke up by the engravers doing their work. It's not really a good way to work around that, unfortunately. Let's see what we've got here that's not doing anything. Our stone carver is sitting there doing nothing. Need to check and see if I put his jobs on repeat properly. Our miners aren't doing anything useful. We've got a few people on break. Okay, so let's deal with these one at a time. First off, stone carver. Why are you not working on stones? Well, it says you've got that. Did I turn off your laboring dwarf therapist? Let's take a look. Sure enough, I turned off all stone crafting duties. Whoops, my bad. So right now you're going to do stone crafting. Now we're going to turn off all of these masons that we had building all of our special extra stuff. Go back to the way it was when only our masons did masonry, and unsuspend any block jobs so that our masons can go back to accruing experience building stone blocks once again. If you're ever stuck for trade goods, you don't have any metal, and you're looking for things to sell, mechanisms work really well as trade goods when you first start out. They have a reasonably good value, You produce them from rocks, which otherwise don't have much value at all. The downside to mechanisms, despite their value, they are actually fairly heavy, and so you can only sell. You can't sell as many of them as you could sell, for example, mugs. The situation we've got here with this setup is that I'm going to have plenty of mechanisms to finish building that bridge. We've run out of food storage items, so at this point we're going to have to get some more rock pots built, or we're not going to be able to brew any more drinks. Now, for the moment, that's not really a problem. We've got 571 drinks. I'm going to take a moment right now and step away from keyboard for just a second, guys, and I'll be right back. I've got to fill up my drink. Okay, I'm back. For those of you asking, you're better off not looking at YouTube right yet. I don't have any of these episodes posted to YouTube, and I probably won't until I finish the third or maybe even the fourth one. Twitch retains my old videos for at least a week. Since we just started doing this series about a day ago, you can actually look at my channel on Twitch and pick up the first episode there, watch it, and then immediately transition into this episode if you like. I will get them posted on YouTube, and when I finally do that, you'll see an additional section in my posts on Reddit that pertains to where you can go on YouTube and what to search for within my channel for these videos. But for right now, none of this stuff is on YouTube. I have an older tutorial sitting out there on YouTube. You'll find that my voice is a little lower, and it's kind of hard to hear me, and the music is a little loud, and I'm not really explaining anything to an audience of people actually asking me questions and prompting me, so occasionally I'm going to do things or forget to hit the push to talk key or a whole host of other things. It's just not as good a set of tutorials. You're more than welcome to go and look at it. By all means, feel free. The search term is Tin Sound on YouTube, and I am Nerudin Corpse Slaver on YouTube. You should be able to find my channel that way. I'll go ahead and see if I can get you a link real fast. Unfortunately, like I said, none of this current series is out there on YouTube at all. I'll go ahead and link you guys a copy of, or the link to Tin Sound, so that you can go there yourselves. That link there will link you to the first video in the 10 sound series. There are 10 of them. One of them is like 2 minutes long. They're not particularly good. I'm just, personally I feel that this series is going to wind up being better. But you can go and look at them. You're really better off just heading to Twitch for right now. Okay, let's see. Where are we? We've got plenty of food. We've got plenty of drink. We've got our magma taps started. I don't think we've actually finished them yet, so let's go take a look and see where we're at on the magma area. And then we'll see what we've got to do to get this up and running. It looks like all of the mining has been done. But as before, remember, you'd want to make sure that nobody's, traipsing around in the magma tubes right before the magma comes in. So the first thing you do is you forbid everything in the magma pipes. All of it. You want to make sure that all of it is forbidden. If you don't, the first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to come running down the stairs to pick up a brick, and then the magma's going to flow in behind them, and that's going to lead to predictable and hilarious consequences that you probably don't want. The dwarven instinct for self-preservation is never fully developed. That's the problem you're going to run into. Okay, with the magma taps built and the items in the magma pipes forbidden, we can now punch holes into the magma taps and let the magma spill down those extra pipeways. Basically, the problem we're running into is our magma pipes are not wide enough for the giant magma chambers I've created. I like nice giant magma chambers, even if they're not necessarily the most mechanically efficient, and it's useful to demonstrate the technique of how to tap the magma multiple times for those folks who may not have caught the video and are just now joining us live for now. What will happen is our miners will come along from above, punch a hole through that wall down onto the lower level. The magma will flow down the stairs, down into the pipe, and all the way over to our forge area on its own. We won't have to do anything further with it. Now, we didn't actually connect up the forge area itself, so you may notice there's still a wall between both of the new magma tunnels and the actual forge area. And the way we get around that is by punching a hole above the magma right here at this point, and that will give us an access on the bottom path, and then we just seal it back up with a wall. Notice that when the magma begins flowing down these new pipes, there's a momentary FPS hit. Those of you on who aren't running beefy computers may want to be aware. I don't know if you've noticed, but my frame rate has dropped to like 25 from a normal of 50. Large volumes of fluid movement can really bring your computer down to its knees. This will stabilize. Oh, I think we're about to get another wildfire. See there? That's what's happening. Something's falling into the magma or touching the magma and then making a splash. And we're about to get another wildfire. Man, I wish I knew what was actually causing that. I'm thinking it's an animal or a bird or something that's, getting tagged by fire imps, or it's landing in the lava like a twit. But the wildfire is going to sweep through the area again, and anything on the surface is going to burn the hell out of it. My miner is blinking. Yes, that's correct. My miner is blinking, and the reason is all of my miners are now legendary miners. In fact, they're legendary plus something miners. At skill level 15, your dwarves will become legendaries. There are 25 real skill or 20 real skill levels, so they'll cap out at 20, which is a legendary plus 5. Legendary plus X has an effect, but generally speaking, once a dwarf reaches legendary, you're going to see that blink. Even in ASCII, they blink. It's not just this tile set. There's nothing special about Phoebus in that regard. So, for example, if I can find that miner again, you're going to see this little blink on him. That's because he's a legendary miner. This will apply to your soldiers, it will apply to your craftsmen. Any dwarf with a high skill will blink. There is a security risk from the magma tunnel. Yes and no. First off, these openings that I've created for the actual tap have a security risk because something could fly down into this level which does not have magma. This magma you're seeing here is on the level below us. They could fly down into this open space and just fly into the hole here and come right on in through the hallways. Anything that can actually swim in lava, and there are things that can, although not many, could theoretically swim down the lava pipe and, you know, end up underneath our forges. But what we're going to do here when we're finished is we're going to punch the holes for our magma forges from above, and then we'll immediately seal them up with buildings. So there won't be anything that can actually come in from below in the magma chambers, except through this little staircase here, which I will probably just, you know, dig these gems out, since that's actually valuable, and then floor that over, and we won't have to worry about it. So yeah, if you're being paranoid, and I generally am, yes, your magma tunnel represents a danger. No, your magma tunnel doesn't represent a really big danger until later. All bets are off if you're playing Masterwork. I don't play Masterwork. This is Vanilla Dwarf Fortress. But I'm told that there are a lot more esoteric threats in Masterwork that you have to watch out for. Fortifications will not work for that purpose. People keep suggesting that I use fortifications, for example, for barring off my well. We're not sure if it's a bug or if it's a feature, but right now, if flow it reaches a level of 7 deep on a fortification and something is swimming, it can swim right through the fortification. Not be pushed by flow, but actually swim through a flooded fortification. Feel free to check the bug tracker. It applies to water. I'm betting money that it also applies to magma. I make my magma flow up through a grate. I do not use fortifications for that reason. It used to be the case that you could use a fortification for this, but it is no longer the case that you can do so. Fortifications are not sufficient to save you from things swimming in. What will work, and works even against building destroyers, is what I did with the well, and it'll be a little difficult to see. This pipe here, this long, what looks like a staircase, but is actually a pipe, ends in a grate before it drops down one level and comes back up. That U-bend with a grate over it, anything that came in from the outside would swim down into the lower level and move over to the right, but it cannot break the grate above it. It can't destroy the grate. And so you end up with a building effectively on this level that can't be affected by a building destroyer on the lower level, and so that grate is impervious. You can do that with magma as well, but keep in mind, items you build that come into contact with magma have to be what is called magma safe. That is to say, they have to be temperature tolerant enough to survive immersion in magma. If you go out on the wiki and Google magma safe, you will find a list of various types of stone and materials that you can make items out of to ensure that they are magma safe. Non-magma safe items will melt, burn, catch fire, and generally just not work for what you're using them for here. In this case, I'm not going to worry too much about things coming up through the magma. By the time anything would come up through our magma, we're not going to have a place for it to come up through the magma, and we'll be safe. I am, however, going to go back down here, and I'm going to build a couple of levers. And these levers will control my outer and inner gates on the customs area.
No. I said no.
Oh, something's blocking our bridge upstairs. We gotta go take a look and see what's going on up here. It looks like we have a firelight block, and I'm guessing that firelight block is being used for some job somewhere. Let's see if we've got a suspended job that may be fouling up the works. Our bridge is suspended. In fact, we've got 2 bridges that are suspended. That's not good. I'm betting we had something come along and distract our guy, and he got distracted and left his brick right in the middle of where I was going to build the other bridge, and so he's blocked both bridges with 1 brick. And yep, sure enough, that's our problem. Okay, and now they're building both bridges. Good, good, good. Once these bridges are actually built, we'll get them linked to levers, one for the inner, one for the outer, and then we'll get them, I'll show you how you can button them up, how you'll label them so you can remember which lever pulls which bridge, and so forth. And yes, we really did do exactly that, Print. He stopped 2 bridges with 1 stone. Now, one thing you can't do without causing ourselves a problem is we can't simply fill this tunnel with traps. In earlier versions of V34, you could build traps and the wagons would roll across them no problem. But then Toady made a change, and we're assuming it's some type of behavior inherited from track stops for minecarts, since traps are treated as a type of track stop, or track stops are treated as a type of trap, I can't remember which. That causes wagons to be unable to traverse traps. So if I filled this tunnel, this hallway here, with traps, we'd get merchants in, but they'd leave their wagons behind. And as you've seen, that gives you only a handful of trade goods by comparison to what they'll bring in wagon caravans, where the goods are just, falling out everywhere. There's 2 ways to get around this, and one is to build elaborate mazes of traps, because the goblins will just run straight through the maze, and effectively every time they cross a wall they're going to get hit with a trap, and the wagons will wind their way around through the traps that they can't cross, eventually getting to your depot normally. And the second one is you can build an airlocked depot, for example, where the outer bridge is always open and the inner bridge is closed. And when the merchants get into the depot and start unloading, you close the outer bridge and open the inner bridge so you can do your trading. And then once you're done, you close the inner bridge again and open the outer bridge so they leave. That's a little more complicated. We could certainly do it at some point down the road, but this depot we've got here is just a temporary one. So what we'll probably end up doing initially is I'll probably just layer this sucker with traps temporarily, and bypass any wagons. I'll leave it active for the moment so that we can get wagons coming from the humans and the dwarves probably for this year, but after that we're probably going to need to be able to button it up to prevent sieges and ambushes from getting into our fortress through that relatively undefended entrance. Okay, let's take a look at our kitchen and see what we've got going on in terms of things that can be cooked and brewed. We don't want you cooking our wild strawberries. We don't want you cooking our fisher berries. I don't have any rope breeds that haven't been brewed down already. I don't really want to brew plump helmets. I want to get these smaller quantity plants brewed, converted back to seeds, and replanted. We've got plenty of plump helmets to last us. We've got plenty of dwarven wine to last us. One thing you want to be wary of with booze: if dwarves drink a single type of booze indefinitely, they will just pretty much stop drinking it. That can produce unpleasant consequences. They will go drink water, but they will get unhappy thoughts for being forced to drink water instead of booze, and they'll get an unhappy thought from drinking the same old booze all the time. So, just at random, let's see if we've got anybody that's, just real quick to see if anybody's done it. Doesn't look like She's had a fine drink. She dined in a legendary dining room. She slept without a proper room, but she wasn't sleeping in the mud. She talked with a friend. She's been satisfied at work, and she complained about the lack of a well. Well, as soon as our forges are up and running, we're going to solve that well problem. And that whole legendary dining room thing, you know, it's a fine dining room. That's not even a particularly nice dining room yet. It'll eventually be a lot nicer than this. Dwarves start off at content when they arrive. As you can see, our general happiness has moved them one step effectively to the right. Ideally, you want to have as many dwarves as possible in the ecstatic category to offset the inevitable bad results you're going to get when certain things happen, like, you know, murders and mayhem. We'll get that first bridge linked up, and then once that's done, we'll get the outer bridge linked up, and at that point we will be ready to button this place down permanently. We have a couple of dwarves who have a real problem, though. Notice these guys sitting here at the wagon, and they can't figure out what to do, and they look like they've got that little brown down arrow. In the Phoebus tile set, that tells me that they're hungry. And the reason they're hungry is because that bridge that we had jammed up earlier, I've already removed the ramps, and so there's no way into the fortress. The walls block them off, and there's no ramps to get up through the bridge, and the bridge isn't complete, so they're stuck outside the fortress. There's an easy fix, and the easy fix is I'm going to punch a hole in the wall temporarily. Anyone can remove a construction. Even children will come along and remove constructions, even if you're not, you know, using dwarf therapists to cheat. Children are more than happy to come along. Thief! And they're going to move some gear in and get some stuff from the wagon that we left out there. One thing I didn't do that I really want to is I want to go ahead and get another stockpile created. Normally, I would not create a stone stockpile. This is an exception, and the reason we're doing it here is because we're going to set wheelbarrows on this. We will only allow a maximum of 3 haulers, which is the most you can use with wheelbarrows, to stock this stone stockpile. That means I won't have my entire hauler corps trying to haul boulders out of the basement. We'll get stones moved here with wheelbarrows. The dwarves will happily take the wheelbarrows from that surface area and use them, and holy crap, it's another damn wildfire. I have dogs, but I don't have any out this far from the entrance. Oh! Guess we're going to find out if our anvil is fire safe, huh? Yep, can't get in that way either way, guys. Good job. You may have just gotten yourselves burned up. Congratulations. I'm thinking that we just lost a dwarf to our, what, 3rd, 4th, 5th wildfire? How many is this now? We also have, our anvil is stuck out there at the moment. Notice our hauler here is marked as missing. That's because he just got himself burned alive. First casualty of the game! Dun dun dun! Notice how many great horned owls, you know, met their end here. I keep wanting to assert that owls, weasels, and so forth are either falling in or being attacked on the edge of the magma with predictable consequences. The fire, I'm guessing, probably didn't leave a body. That's both good and bad. Good because it will keep people from discovering the corpse. Bad because it means we don't have a corpse to bury. Ghosts are not something you want to do. Yeah, I'll get to that eventually, but at this point I'm more worried about what we're going to do for the first siege. We've already got 150,000 wealth, so we're due for a Forgotten Beast or a siege or an ambush or something at this point, and our defenses basically consist of walls and bridges, and that's it. We don't have a military. We have no war dogs trained yet. We're running a little slow on defenses at this point. We're in mid-spring of the second year. That's a little late to be getting defenses up. Walls around the volcano are not really my first priority at this point. Although, yes, that will stop the wildfire spread. In order to stop it differently, another way instead of building walls is I could actually just trench it out. Dig a big trench all the way around it. There's more than enough room around the volcano to dig it out and be safe that way as well. I don't think the fire can actually go down a level. The ramps have never burned, so the fire has never actually entered the pit that we dug in the first season, in the first year when we've had the first wildfire. This is definitely more wildfires than I've ever had on this map. I can tell you that. Let's take a look here. We're going to need to get our stonecrafter to build something that you have to do for funerary purposes called a rock slab. We have to get your mason to build the slab, so let's go ahead and get a mason started on that because I want to go ahead and get this guy taken care of before he becomes a murderous rampaging ghost. Once the slab is built, we can then memorialize that slab and build it somewhere, and typically I like to build my funerary complexes right off of my lever and dining room areas. Personally, your mileage may vary. So what we'll do here is we'll have hallways that branch off from this, and the left and the right hallways will be for levers down the road, whereas this hallway will actually emerge into what will eventually become a funerary complex with little catacomb niches on either side of the hallway as we go down. I may have to try that, guys. To be honest, I've never had to try triggering a wildfire before. This is like I said, I've played on this map before. The first time I played on this map, I lost 5 of my 7 dwarves to the first wildfire. It came out of nowhere, and by the time I realized there was a problem, it was already on top of the wagon. 5 dwarves got trapped and died before they could get to the brook. 2 of them managed to outrun the wildfire, and that was promptly Tantrum Central, toss the fort in the pit, and start again. Hey, look, he's been missing for a week. You think maybe something happened to him? I don't know, George. Ha! I got trapped by my own cleverness. Remember, we set up a profile and we said only the experienced dwarf can do this thing. Yeah, well, I then assigned the rock slab to the workshop that can only have 1 dwarf that does the job, and he's busy. Daggone it, somebody's going to build that slab, even if I have to suspend every job in the fortress to get it. I have hooked up one of the bridges. The other bridge is not yet hooked up. If you want to see it, here's how the process works. You go to the bridge, you query it with Q, you hit add a task, you link the bridge, you pick the bridge you want to link, you add the mechanisms, that's it, it's done. The dwarves will come along and they'll link it up and away we go. This is our second migrant wave, I think. Hang on a second. Maybe it's our third. No, it's only our second. We haven't actually had our third migration wave yet, but we're due for it, and it will probably be a doozy. Yeah, linking levers in this, Dwarven levers effectively work by radio. You put the mechanisms in, and then it kind of abstracts the actual linkage. Typically, if I were going to be playing for myself, I would probably have already started enlisting military people. With the distraction of the first couple of wildfires, we didn't get as much production done as we usually would have. I suspect with this third migration wave, I will have more dwarves than I know what to do with initially this early on. I'll have more than enough people to recruit for our military, and we'll probably start now. Typically, I would have started a military on or around winter or fall. We're in mid-spring now, so I'm running a little behind where I would normally prefer to be. A lot of that's because I keep forgetting to pause the game. When I pause to talk to you guys, I let the game run, and time keeps passing even though I'm not doing the tasks I would normally be seeing to. Depending on your playstyle, when you play Dwarf Fortress, you may spend more or less time on pause. I tend to pause obsessively when I'm playing for myself, just like I would in SimCity. I don't let things keep running while I'm trying to figure out what to do. I pause the game, and my decisions effectively become instant from the perspective of the game. Our miners need something to do, our gatherer needs something to do, our farmers need something to do. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's get the rock pot business up and running a little more heavily here. Let's add rock pots over here as well. We've got our slab, I think, built at this point, so let's go ahead and get our skilled dwarf here, who is also our skilled stone carver, to add a engraved memorial slab job to deal with our dwarf. Our dwarf will have two names. That other guy is a kobold. Yes, you can memorialize your kobolds. I don't know why you'd want to, but you can. You might want to memorialize your forgotten beasts, titans, and so forth. If you killed the goblin, leader, for example, you might want to memorialize that guy. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, now with that done, I think he's already completed the job. Here, let's see. Nope. He's finished a day site piccolo, and that's it. And now he's gone on break. Forever. Gonna get that job done no matter what.
Some migrants have arrived.
Okay, let's see how bad the damage is. Going from 17 to 42 dwarves. So this third migration wave is 25 dwarves in size. Considering up to this point I didn't even have 25 dwarves, I've effectively doubled my fortress in the third migrant wave. This is typically what you will find. You are probably producing, especially as new players, you are probably not controlling your wealth production as tightly as you can, and so you will get large chunks of dwarves arriving in the third and fourth waves, and if you're not careful, they can quickly overwhelm your food supply and leave you starving, dehydrated, and with your industries crumbling around you simply by overpopulation when you're not expecting it. Now, when we've done this, as you can see, we've got 286, plants and 538 drinks. Now that's enough to get these 40 dwarves through a season or two on booze and 3 or 4 seasons worth of food just on what we've got already without having to produce anything extra. You have to make sure that you overproduce initially to handle a larger migration wave if you are not going to control very tightly your wealth creation. Typically, I don't worry too much about wealth creation. As you can see, I've already got enough wealth here to trigger a Forgotten Beast. which is, I think, 100,000 or 80,000, something like that by default. At this point, we're due for an attack by something unpleasant. I knew I was going to get a large migration wave, and I've planned accordingly. Remember, when I started this session tonight, we had 5 drinks, and we actually bottomed out at 0, and we've come back to 538 in that time frame. So in 2 seasons, I've created 530 drinks on the spot. You can do that, but you have to have the materials on hand to be able to turn them around as finished goods. You end up with a situation, if you don't do that, where that big migration wave hits, and just about the time you're starting to get your food under control for that wave, wham, that 4th migration wave hits, and it's probably going to be another doozy just like this one, and suddenly you're dealing with triple the population you had when you first started, and if you're not planning ahead, it's going to catch you out every time. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, look at all those meat shields. That's a military waiting to be hired. Let's go over and look at military roles for a minute. Now, all of these guys came with some predefined military skills. See these little 3s here? They're not particularly high-skilled warriors, but they came with a bunch of them already skilled up in fighting, and that's what we're going to need now. So, here's what we're going to do now. Before we do anything else, we do the same thing we do every time we get a migration wave. We make everyone into haulers. All of them. Now, this guy actually has a really high skill in engraving. So I'm going to go ahead and make him an engraver. This guy has a mediocre skill in engraving. Having 2 engravers isn't necessarily a bad thing. I probably wouldn't do more than 2. 1 is usually all I would do, but we're going to have more dwarves than we know what to do with here in a minute, so having 2 isn't going to hurt us. Now remember, 3 of these guys are hunters. They came with the hunter skill enabled. That means they're going to have crossbows, they're going to have bolts, they're going to have quivers. The bad news is if I turn that off, they're going to drop it at the edge of the map. Thieves are going to steal it. We're going to get more people. Or more kobolds and goblin sieges. That's bad. We don't want that. So these 3 guys are going to now join the military as crossbowmen. And we'll resort by profession and take another look. So now at this point I've got 4 people doing hunting. They're only going to hunt until they run out of bolts. At that point they'll stop hunting and they basically revert back to being haulers without wood cutting. That's okay. If I look at the military jobs for those guys who I've set up as military, all of them have a fairly decent Marks Dwarf skill. They're not great, except for the guy that's been doing his hunting. As they hunt, they will get better at shooting crossbows. They will eventually become incredibly lethal at it. When we start doing butchery en masse, and we're getting ready to start butchering here momentarily so I can start getting some bones, we'll start producing bolts, and those guys are suddenly going to have more ammo. They're going to go out and do more hunting. They're going to get better at crossbows. You see how this becomes a self-feeding cycle. Eventually, I will bring them back into the fortress with a burrow, turn off their hunting, and convert them into military dwarves rather than hunters. Don't like leaving dwarves out in the open doing hunting on a long-term basis. Now, that takes care of the first couple of categories. You know, there's not much in these first 3 categories that's left in the hunter area. We've got one guy who's actually a skilled diagnoser. Congratulations, he just made the ranks of the executives. He's now a mad doc. He'll do diagnosing and so forth, and he'll also do mechanics, because I need something else for him to do, otherwise he's idle all day long. Now, typically, I will assign a small group of dwarves to be doctors. Not just a doctor, I will assign multiple doctors. And the reason is, if the doctor gets wounded, who diagnoses him? I'll give you a hint. Nobody. Your chief medical doctor is not the only person who can diagnose dwarves. He's usually the best at it because he gets first crack. But if there's somebody else available and the chief medical dwarf is idle, other dwarves with the diagnosing labor will diagnose dwarves. They won't necessarily do a perfect job at it, and it'll take them a while, but it's a whole lot better than having nobody diagnose them and the guy sitting in the hospital for 3 months dying of an infection because nobody came around to see to him. So, let's look through and see if anybody has any other skills we actually care about. See, there's some people here who have skills that I don't want to tie them up doing other things. I want them doing those things. So, let's go ahead and take this first female here, and we'll make her into a mad doc as well. And let's see, metal crafter, useless. You'll be a mad doc as well. Now, at that point, I've got 3 people doing mechanics and doctoring. So I no longer need to have my mine workers really doing mechanisms anymore. They won't mood mechanisms anyway, they'll mood mining. That's perfectly fine. I'll let the mad docs handle the trap building at this point. We're in good shape there. As you can see, I've got 2 dwarves who have some metal crafting skills, so I typically make them into metal. I've got a dwarf who's a gem setter, and we'll go ahead and convert him into what I call a ceramics worker, and give him the gem setting jobs as well. Typically, ceramics in my fortress, you're doing glass, you're doing pottery, you're doing glazing. Glass can also be used to make pseudo gems with basically glass gems that you can then cut into cut glass gems and set by encrusting into things. So somebody who's doing glass making can also benefit from doing the jewelry crafting skills. When they're not doing one, they can be doing the other. Generally speaking, I just lump all these things together as a ceramics job, just because that's the way I roll. And so this guy's going to do ceramics once we get the ceramics area up and running. We don't have a whole lot of other useful, nice skills here. There's a guy who would make a decent farmer. We're going to go ahead and convert him over. I've got a couple of fishermen, but other than that, not a whole lot going on here. I'll bounce over to social and see if the haulers have anything unusual in the social roles, but it doesn't look like they've got anything there. There's no record keepers besides the one that I assigned earlier. Organizer is the skill associated with managers, and we don't have anybody who came with manager already in hand. Appraiser is the skill associated with your broker, and we only have the broker that we have, so that's pretty much it for him. Looks like we're probably just going to have to make do with what we've got here. So, let's go ahead and get these 3 guys assigned to fishing. So now we have fishermen doing fishing. We have all of our haulers doing the fish cleaning for them. They will just basically go and fish the brook dry, more or less. These metal crafters, ceramics workers, and so forth will be idle for a bit while we're waiting on our forges to get up and running. This guy here, actually, we're going to make him into a weaponsmith too. And I don't care if he drops his bow at the edge of the map. He's going to become a metal worker. I want him in the fortress, and so I can save that skill for later. You'll notice that I assign all of these skills to all these dwarves. I'm freely going to take advantage of the fact that you can make chain leggings and then melt them down and end up with more metal than you started with. And when I do that, since I'm going to have more metal than I know what to do with, there's nothing that stops me from grinding, blacksmithing, metal crafting, weaponsmithing, armoring, and furnace operating all on the same dwarf. Furnace operating I do in parallel anyway. If I need these guys to specialize in just crafting weapons and armor, I'll turn off furnace crafting and let them do it. And we'll still have more forges up and running than we will actually have metal crafters for right now. I'll have 8 forges operational, and 9 smelters, and 9 kilns, and 9 glass furnaces. I'll have far, far more capacity for them than I will have dwarves to operate them. This hauler core is probably large enough now that it's still going to be larger than anything I need. So let's go over and bounce and look at military. Now's a real good time before these sieges start showing up to start looking at military. Holy cow, this guy is a sword master. Well, good for him, but I don't actually use swords in my military, so he's going to get retrained. However, he'll make a decent militia captain, so Cog here is going to become our new militia captain. For those of you wanting to learn about the military, this is where it starts. First, you have to create a militia commander, a squad governed by the militia commander. For right now, I'm going to give it no uniform. You can then create a command. You can then have to assign a commander to the squad. Remember, I said when Cog. he's going to become our first guy. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to take a momentary break from this screen and go back over to the Splinter Mind Dwarf Therapist. And the reason is because, unlike regular Dwarf Therapist, Cog here, you'll notice he turns blue because he's now a militia captain. Splinter Mind version of Dwarf Therapist can actually assign dwarves directly to a militia squad, as well as assigning their professions. So this is one of those tricks I pull with the extra tools that really simplifies creation and maintenance of a military. And here's how it works. I have already added this guy to a squad, so I have him in a squad and he is already, set up and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead in this first squad, we're going to make into, hammer dwarves. Why not? We'll assign all of our skilled hammer dwarves, and then some of the other folks who have other skills that we either aren't going to use, like swords, for example. And now I have 6, and actually 7, because I forgot to assign Cog his profession name. I have... I made him a chopper. I don't want to make him a chopper. I want to make him a smasher. There we go. I now have 7 dwarves assigned to a military squad that can hold 10. I do run spears. I do run axes. So we'll probably go ahead and assign these guys to spear and axe squads, respectively. And as I get other... Eventually I'll move... See these guys down here that are fishermen? Yeah, that's nice that they're fishermen, but I really need military more than I need anything else right now, so I have 3 slots in here. I'm going to take you guys, and you're all going to become smashers. Congratulations. And with 10, I've now maxed out the squad. You can only have 10 dwarves in a squad. This squad is now full. You can view squads by looking at squad, and you'll see that the Subtleties of Glazing, which is a name I unfortunately can't control or choose, has 10 people in it. They are led by Cog. It will list their skills here. It'll list which weapons they're better with. Like I said before, I have 10 ants. They're ants. I don't care what they're good at. I care what I make them into, and I will make them into a military force to be feared eventually. However, when they're idle, and they are going to be idle right now, I want to make sure that they're doing useful things. So, when they're idle, I have them doing hauler tasks. You'll notice that their jobs are identical to the hauler waves. Let me go ahead and resort this by profession so you can kind of see. You'll notice that my smashers and my haulers basically have the same tasks all the way across the board. If a hauler does it, so does the military. Whenever the military isn't doing anything else, they're acting like haulers. That includes everything. Cutting wood, you name it, they do it all. My crossbow dwarves are going to do hunting when they're not doing something else. We're getting ready to start on dealing with cloth as well, and that's something we haven't touched yet. Cloth and leather and bone. Right now I've got a couple of dwarves who are merch dwarves. We can go ahead and assign them to the DACA category, my crossbow guys. Now, I do turn off wood cutting on these folks generally. I'm not going to bother with worrying about it on the choppers or the stabbers yet. I'm not going to have equipment for them for just a moment. My smashers are going to be the only squad I've actually created. Although I've assigned a military profession to several dwarves, only the smashers are actually in a squad and will claim military equipment. I've turned off wood cutting because sometimes you get into issues where the woodcutter uniform, the invisible civilian uniform, conflicts with the existing military uniform, leading to circumstances where they don't equip the weapons they're supposed to, and they charge into battle with training axes, and sometimes they just won't equip anything at all, and just don't put woodcutting on your military guys. However, these folks that I've assigned to a profession but haven't actually put into a squad, they're not technically in the military yet. Eventually they'll become spearmen or crossbowmen or axemen, but for right now they're just glorified haulers. They can keep right on doing the hauler tasks I had for them all along. That's perfectly okay with me until I'm ready to actually use them for something more. We do, however, want to go ahead and as soon as possible we want to start getting the smashers equipped, because they're going to need to get their gear in order to train. At this point we've dealt with our migration wave. Everybody's assigned. Let's get them inside. Our forges should just about be ready to come up and start running very soon here. You notice the 2 of 2 is now much more present in all those side rooms. With 3 magma taps flowing into this chamber, it's going to fill up probably this season up to the level we'll need it. Once it gets all of this in and the evaporation stops, the level will start to increase fairly quickly. We won't have the level 1 tiles sucking up magma flow anymore, and we'll start on it pretty quickly. In the short term, in order to get us up and running faster and to explain how you handle... I didn't think you could change squad names. You can? I can... Oh, yeah, you can name a squad. So this is... Fantastic. Thank you, Pudding. I had never noticed that button before. That's awesome. Ta-da! Of course, that's the wrong name because they're actually smashers, but oh well, it's the thought that counts. Yep, yeah they are. And we fixed it now. Okay, so notice that these folks got added. I didn't add them manually in through this interface. The Splinter Mind Fork version of Dwarf Therapist can add them to the squad once it exists. Now, I cannot add people to a squad that doesn't exist. I have to come into the military interface to create the squads, and then I can start adding people to them. But once I've got a militia commander, I can create as many squads as I want, and at that point it really doesn't matter. I can create all the squads and then rename them later. So right now we'll just go ahead and get a bunch of them all created up, and we can deal with what they are down the road, not worry about it for right now. Some folks like to get their civilians all drafted into the military. They never activate the squads, they just get them into the military so that they can control whether their civilians wear armor or not. I typically don't go that far, but if you're looking to really, make your dwarves a powerful civilization, armoring your civilians and giving them all a weapon is a good way to start, because it means when the guy's out there cutting wood, all of a sudden something comes along and, jumps him, he can turn around and apply that wooden training axe while wearing full armor, and that thief is probably not long for this world. And because I'm 14, awesome. Okay, so now we've got our smashes set up in a squad, but we've told this squad that it does not have any equipment. We've told them not to use a uniform. They have no equipment, they have nothing. And we've not even told them what to use. So the next step is to actually create a uniform for the squad. Now, the reason I name my dwarves the military, smashers, choppers, etc., is so I can control what uniforms I get, as well as what squads they go into, and so forth and so on. And the way I typically do this is I create a uniform, and then I name it that type. So, for example, here's the smasher uniform. Okay, fantastic. Now, we need to add items to this, so that's the next step. As we go over here to the right and we start adding things. And the way I do this is I add mail shirts and breastplates. I go to legs, and I add greaves. I go to helm, and I add helms. I go to gloves, and add gauntlets. I go to boots, and add high boots. I go to shields, and add shields. Not shields and bucklers, just shields. I go to weapon, and I add only the weapon I want. In this case, it's warhammers. And then I go back and I do materials. My mail shirts are going to be steel. My breastplates are going to be steel. My helms are going to be steel. My greaves are going to be steel. You kind of get the principle here. All of these things are going to be steel, except... And those of you following along at home who know what warhammers are going to be, now's a good time to chime in and show off your experience. Yeah. And here's one of the oddities. Dwarf Fortress is incredibly realistic in how it models material deformation, weight, the physics of actually swinging a weapon. And as it turns out, heavier weapons do better with respect to blunt weapons. So in reality, the best case here would actually be silver. I probably don't have any silver on the map, and I'll have to import it if I do. Iron is a good substitute. Bronze or copper even will work for blunt weapons. Blunt weapons, the advantages are that they tend to penetrate armor well. Heavily armored critters, it doesn't really, have any impact that they're armored. So when the goblins come in and they're wearing a full suit of armor, iron warhammers just pretend like that armor doesn't exist, or nearly enough. Bladed weapons, the advantages is that they tend to strike a crippling or debilitating or incapacitating blow more easily. Dwarves or goblins, for example, don't wear armor on all their parts usually, so they'll have unarmored legs, for example, and the guys with the battle axes will come in and whack whack. There's no legs on that goblin anymore. He bleeds out and stops moving, and that's, fixes our problem. Be very wary when you make materials about this last category. I'm not going to explain what adamantine is at this point. Suffice to say, it is useless for blunt weapons. Do not make blunt weapons from adamantine. Make them from something heavy: iron, silver, copper, bronze, steel if you must. If you just want to have it match, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but iron works perfectly well and doesn't require the extra processing. So, we'll set this up. Now notice, I've got partial matches turned on. So if I turn this off, they won't wear anything unless it matches exactly this uniform. So if I had an iron mail shirt and no steel mail shirts and exact matches was on, they won't wear it because it's not steel, and I told them specifically only to wear steel. I leave partial matches on. Now, this is a fairly solid basic level of armor. You can go out on the wiki and look at the maximum layering. You can do some really silly, bizarre equipping strategies where you end up with 6 cloaks and 6 hoods and 3 mail shirts and 2 breastplates and 40,000 pairs of greaves, and your dwarves effectively end up like main battle tanks by the time you're done. I normally just don't go that far. You can, and it really does help, but it's just usually not worth worrying about from my standpoint. Now, the last thing I'll typically add is I'll go back, and I typically forget to add it, and so I have in this case as well, and I'll add a cloak. Notice that it inserts it in the middle of the list because that's the way the layering works. Mail shirts go underneath, followed by breastplates, followed by cloaks. If I added hoods, they would go over the top of the helmets, and so forth and so on. Whenever possible, the dwarves are set to wear their uniform over their clothing. You can set it to replace clothing, but if there's a conflict, the armor takes precedence, so they'll wear the steel high boots, not their cloth shoes. Armor counts as clothing. When I get to the subject of clothing later, armor works perfectly well as clothing. This is a fairly decent basic uniform. Oh, I forgot to set the material on the cloak. Let's go ahead and do that. I typically like to tell them to wear leather cloaks. If you're looking for style, you probably want to have them wear silk or yarn. Leather is actually more protective for what little value they're going to get out of it anyway. Just go with that because that's what I go with. Your mileage may vary. I don't usually worry about color. If you're going to be dyeing your outfits, this is your chance to, knock yourself out, and you can have your dwarves all colored in blue or whatever color outfit you want. Now, with a uniform created, that's fantastic, but what I haven't done is I haven't told the squad to use the uniform. So I still have a squad. They're still not assigned a uniform. I just have a type of uniform created for them. So I go into the equipment screen, and I assign the Smashers the Smasher uniform. So we go into the Assign Uniforms screen. I go over to the Smasher uniform, and I hit Shift-Enter to tell the entire squad to use that same uniform. Presto, all of my guys are now assigned a uniform. Now, at this point, I don't actually have the equipment, so having them have a uniform doesn't do me a whole lot of good. There's no hammers, there's no armor, there's no cloaks. So basically, they're going to continue to wear nothing other than their civilian equipment. But once the armor and the weapons start becoming available, they will immediately run off and automatically start claiming those items and get that underway. Now, what we didn't do before and what we are going to do now is I'm going to temporarily build a couple of smelters to start processing before our forges or before our magma actually gets ready. I'm going to build a couple of just basic smelters and a wood furnace or two to process wood. We have an abundance of wood for right now into charcoal. I'll use the charcoal to power smelters, and we'll get that iron up and running. So in parallel here, I'm going to have a bunch of this stuff, 2 of each of these running at once. Got to have our masons come along, and our masons may be busy, so we'll give them a sec to see if they show up, and if they don't, then I'll go ahead and go upstairs and suspend their job and make them work for it again. Our hunters are busy. Here's something we talked about earlier, clutter. Notice the CLT next to the Mason's Workshop. That tells me that there's enough items in here to start forming a clutter penalty. That designation will get bigger and bigger. It will turn red and purple and all sorts of ugly colors. You'll see quality markers around the clutter. A masterwork clutter is actually really bad. Typically you won't see that because you won't normally get enough gear inside one workshop to do that, but see, this workshop is just absolutely full of blocks. There's blocks on top of blocks on top of blocks, and basically anybody working in the workshop is just so having to work around the clutter all the time ends up with a situation where they perform less efficiently. We have not yet created a block stockpile to take that excess of blocks and move it to storage. At the moment, I'm more concerned with getting our masons working on getting our wood furnaces and our smelters up and running. We'll do this with wood for a moment so you can kind of see how a non-magma workshop operation will work. And we'll go ahead and start on the process of getting all this stuff up and running, so we'll have 2 forges as well. And that'll give us a quick way to get some weapons started so I can get my dwarves training on their weaponry. The 2 skills most important to a dwarf are their weapon skill and their shield skill. Everything else is secondary after that. Weapons are used not just to attack but also to parry. Shields are used not just to attack but also to block special attacks like dragon fire, and also as blunt crushing weapons. So a steel shield is a perfectly serviceable bludgeon in a pinch. A dwarf with high shield and high weapon skills is really hard to take down, and getting your dwarves up and running with a shield and a weapon is the quickest way to get them started on their career in the military, for example. Now, earlier we made a manager. Remember that? We gave him an office and we set up all that stuff. Well, let's take a look here. It looks like we've already burned up all of our wood. So let's go ahead and get our haulers doing their job and cutting us some more wood, because we're going to need wood for the furnaces we just built. And I see that animal following that other hauler around, so that means I've got a pet that needs to be assigned to a pasture somewhere. Let's figure out what pets aren't assigned. Hey, look, I've got a lamb, a calf, some dogs, a bunny, a bull. Yeah, all that stuff's got to be assigned somewhere with pasture so it stays out of the way of trouble. As before, I assign the grazers to the grazer pasture. I assign the non-grazers to the non-grazer pasture. And at this point, we need to start talking about the dogs because they're going to get really overcrowded very soon and they'll start fighting all the time if they haven't already. We're going to go ahead and create another temporary place for them. Actually, I'm not going to create it there. I'm going to go ahead and create it upstairs. These dogs will basically form the first line of our militia.
I can't do it.
Okay, guys, it's approaching 11 o'clock, and at this point, we have the rudiments of a defensive fortress up, although I didn't get to traps tonight. I wasn't sure if I'd actually get that far or not, and I have not. It looks like we're going to need to break here, because 11 o'clock is pretty late for me, guys. I got to work in the morning. I'm going to go ahead and save the game here. Before I quit, does anybody have any questions? I can upload the save. This question's been asked before. I'm keeping seasonal saves, and so what I'll probably do is I'll go back and zip up, for example, the first 2 years as one archive. Actually, yeah, and before I forget, because I will forget tomorrow, in order to prevent that guy from rising as a ghost, I think we got him engraved, but I don't think we actually built the slab. Thank you for pointing that out, because I would have forgotten it later and the ghost would have risen. Ghosts can be a problem, not just because they can rise and scare your dwarves and cause them happy thoughts, but because dwarves can actually be killed by ghosts. It's not a good idea to tempt fate with letting your dead rise as ghosts. No promises they would rise as ghosts, but it could happen. Rather, he didn't. And here in a moment, there comes somebody with the slab, that little domed-shaped thing. And we've got an Elven caravan, so we'll lead off next session with trading with the elves. We'll have our dwarves taken care of. We'll have the rudiments of a defensive fortress built. We'll have some wood in our stockpile to start forging operations ahead of our Magma arrival. With any luck, the elves will have a fair quantity of wood, since we didn't have any wood beforehand. Since we keep losing it all to the wildfires, we really haven't stockpiled any wood, and typically the elves will bring us a fair amount on their merchants. Actually, I don't want a fire to kill them yet. I'm hoping for giant desert scorpions. Breeding pair of giant desert scorpions. I'm willing to accept grizzly bears. I'm willing to compromise. A breeding pair of war grizzlies. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? I can chain them up like dogs right at the front door and wait for the thieves to come in and get their arms ripped off. I could put it behind a door so the thief sneaks in, can't see him until he opens the door, and then wham, there's 2 war grizzlies right in his face. Like I said, folks, some folks love to go to war with the elves. I prefer to make use of them here. In fact, let's take a quick look here. Let's see what we can get out of them real quick. Because chances are good they're not going to have much in the way of goods that I really care about, but the few things that I do care about, I'm going to care about a lot. Our broker will be along here momentarily, and the 2 bins of trap components that we built when we first embarked now is still what we're trading. We don't need a vast quantity of goods. It's more about what we can get. As I mentioned before, the elves will bring lots of wood if we don't have it, so there's some wood that we can add to our stockpile. Go ahead and throw them a disc to offset that. Let's build a couple of ropes. Okay, looks like, you know, I need to know, anybody know if bats are vermin? I can't remember if bats are vermin or not. Okay, we'll let them go for now. I'll go ahead and buy it. Snails are definitely vermin. Looks like we're going to strike out on the whole get a war grizzly pair this time, unfortunately. I will buy some booze. Let's see what we got. A couple of buckets. You may notice that the elves bring wooden weapons and armor. Yeah, they're worth about as much as you might think. However, they also bring seeds for plants that you can't always get, like rope reeds and sunberries. So, in addition to their use for bringing you animals you can't get, they also have a tendency to bring plants you can't get. I've had sunberries imported on this map, for example. Sunberries make an incredibly valuable booze of high value that your dwarves will absolutely kill for. It's an easy way to keep your dwarves happy. Additionally, elves bring oodles and oodles and oodles of cloth, which we will make into bags in our next session. Let's see what else we got here. Willow figurine, arrows, some strawberries, prickleberries, fisherberries. Come on, sunberries. Doesn't look like we're going to need sunberries either. Bummer. Couple of splints for wounds. We'll go ahead and buy all of the crutches and stuff because, hey, it's only a couple of discs. Let's see if he'll take that. And he goes and says, hey, if you throw in all this stuff, now notice, see how much value he's asking for in terms of profit versus value? Our merchant is not particularly skilled. Additionally, you want to be careful with the elves that you do not offer them anything made out of wood. If I were to trade them the bin, for example, they get pissed. They will immediately pack their goods up and take off. You don't want that. That's bad. So what we'll do is... Oh, you mean the trick to level appraiser where you... sell one thing at a time and keep selling one thing at a time? That doesn't actually level appraiser. It levels their other social skills. Appraiser is only trained one time. When you open the trade window for the first time, it appraises the menu. It appraises stuff once. You don't actually get skill ups from opening and closing repeatedly. So what we're going to end up with is I'm going to trade for roughly about 75% profit over and above the value. So I'm trading about 9,000 in goods here, and he's going to get about 4,000 of that, 10,000 in goods, and he's going to get about 4,000 of that in raw profit, and he'll take it first time every time. If you really want to negotiate, especially later once you've got more than you know what to do with, and you don't care if you go to war with the elves if you piss them off, you can try and narrow the profit margins and limit what the traders get. But like I've said before, there's a value in taking advantage of those silly elves bringing you really valuable animals. So I'm actually going to offer them some stuff for free because, yeah, I'm hoping like hell they'll bring me some nice animals next time. And if not, well, I can make better than bronze discs anyway. I'll be making iron and steel before much longer. Okay, trading with the elves done. Our slab built. Anything else I'm forgetting, guys, that I'm going to forget once we get started on the next session, and I'll run halfway through it before I forgot that I've done it? Anything you can think of, anything at all that we've said we needed to get to? Anybody got any questions they want me to answer before I close up for the night? Now's your chance. Yeah, we've been having wildfires all night long. This is our 4th or 5th one. We think that there's an animal that's flying over the volcano and either falling in or flying in or getting hit by something and dropping in, and it splashes magma up to the surface, ignites some of the plants along the edge, and keys off a wildfire, and it burns the entire, 4/5 of the map up from go. We'll look at in the future walling off the volcano so that the wildfire can only spread about, a little ring around it. But for right now, I'm more concerned with getting our fortress defensible. Notice that the wildfire can't burn inside the walls, so we have some green area in here regardless of what else we do. Any other questions we've got for me, guys? Now's your chance. Easy, hard, good, bad, commentary. I'm open to anything, guys. Now's your chance. Yeah, we're ready to start dealing with traps. We will probably not get traps in summer. I will wait until the human caravan has arrived with their wagons and left, and then we will deal with throwing traps up, and we will basically ignore and chain dogs. I just traded for the ropes for the elves, so we now have ropes to assign dogs to for chaining them up. We will get to training schedules once we get equipment for our military. We've got the forges up and running. We've got some wood down here in the stockpile now. This is enough wood to get, I think, our 10 hammers ready. It probably won't get us much more than just the 10 hammers, but down here is a bunch of magma at level 3, and once it's solidly at level 4 all the time, we're ready to open the forges and get started on magma forges. So it won't be much longer now, and we'll actually start magma forging operations, at which point we will crank out a vast array of iron armor and weapons to defend ourselves with. Now keep in mind, my military is piecemeal. I have some dwarves who are good with the weapons they're going to be assigned, but most of them are military dwarves who have effectively been told, hey, oh, look, you're a machine gunner, great, we're going to train you on sniper rifles now. The weapons are vaguely similar, but they're basically newbies at that particular weapon. We have a hospital. It's not zoned as a hospital yet. The dormitory here is going to be our hospital, and we'll have our wells here. We'll need to get the forges up and running because I want to use metal buckets. Ideally, I'd like to do our wells with, gold blocks and gold buckets and gold chains, so they're worth a lot of money. But if I can't, I'm perfectly happy doing iron blocks and iron wells and iron blocks and chains and buckets just fine. We will do our smithing with the manager. Basically, guys, there's and I'll briefly touch it here just for a moment, just to kind of show you. There's a screen in here where you can create a job order and say, I want 20 charcoal. And then after that, I want 10 iron Sorry, it's smelt iron, or smelt hematite, not iron bars. Now, I don't actually think that the 20 is enough to actually get it done. I think we'll probably have to make some more charcoal, but I don't think we actually have more than 20 logs. If I get the Warhammers done, I'll consider myself lucky. Basically, what I'm doing here is I've told the manager, hey, I'm putting in a work order. Tell the wood furnaces that I need 20 charcoal. Tell them to keep doing charcoal until I get 20 and then stop. Smelt me 20 hematite ore, and once they get to 20, you can stop. Give me 10 iron warhammers and then stop. Give me 10 shields and then stop. These jobs won't immediately begin. Notice that there's a validated key over here. The manager has to go to his office and approve the work orders. When he approves a work order, he goes up in his organizer skill, and the jobs are effectively automated for me at that point. There's a way to automate jobs in DF Hack with the workflow tool, and I will try to touch on that later. But this basic interface is sufficient for about 75 or 80% at least of the jobs you're going to need to do certain numbers. So when we get to the point where we're equipping a military, for example, and all of a sudden I need 30 pairs of iron boots, I'll simply go into the manager, queue up 30 sets of iron boots, and go on my merry way. The manager will approve the work order, the smiths will make the stuff, and I won't have to look at it anymore. When we get to the point where we've got 300 dwarves and I don't want to constantly be trying to monitor my level of rock pots and food and booze, I'll probably turn to workflow and say, hey, make sure I've always got 100 rock pots available, make sure I've always got 1,000 prepared meals available, make sure I've always got 2,000 booze available, and workflow will start doing that as a sort of higher level manager than what this is. The manager is, like I said, it's going to cover most of your numbered jobs. When we get to nobles and nobles start making requests of us, it's very easy to go into the job manager and he says, oh, I need 2 short swords, two metal short swords. Well, you just go into the manager and say, make me 2 iron short swords, and as soon as they're made, you go, great, and then you melt them down. And you don't really care that, you've met the noble's demand. At that point, it doesn't matter what you do with them. We're going to get our wells built. We'll get a hospital zoned. We'll get some thread and cloth stationed in here. I'm going to have to make some chains so we can get traction benches for the event that our dwarves end up needing to be put into traction. Traps, military, dogs, wells, hospital. Yeah, that's a pretty good run for what we're going to have to get done tomorrow. We're probably going to be hard-pressed to get to all of that, but we'll see. Sometime in the next session or 2 at most, I expect to start seeing our first invaders. And I don't mean thieves, I mean real invaders. People who come with real hostile intent to really kill your dwarves. Sometime summer, fall this year, we've got enough value that I expect that we'll get to that point. At this point, guys, it's 11:15, and I normally sign off at 11. This is pretty much it. If you guys don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the evening. Anything else? Awesome. I'll go ahead and get you guys another Reddit thread once I know when I'm going to be streaming. I don't know if it'll actually be tomorrow. I may take a break. Talking for 4 hours in a day is a little hard on the vocal cords. I'm not used to speaking at quite this length. But sometime later this week, either tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, I'm going to be back at it for our 3rd session, and we'll start to cover those things that you've listed there. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them, and something comes up and you think about it later, or you start working on your own fortress and you have more questions, by all means, feel free to post in the Reddit thread listing this tutorial, and we'll go ahead and get you some answers. I have, more than enough time during the day to answer questions even when I can't actually do the streaming. Thanks, guys, and have a good night.